because in our field our audience keeps a watch कि इसने ये shirt repeat किया है, ये pant repeat किया है. Now I play a very rich character in my reels. So in that, if I hold iPhone 15, people just laugh at me. I need to show 15 Pro. So that is very minute details I need to show.
Right. So, hi everyone, and welcome to the podcast today and discussion today, because we'd like to get a lot of people, different people involved. We'd like to have conversations on different topics and how art in general can empower people, and what makes it, how does it help us to change society, and what's the scientific approach that we can also use here. I could have nothing, no money, but I have my body and I can dance, I can move. And I can still consider myself a dancer because I move, right? But if I choose to say that I'm a Bharatanatyam dancer, then I need to show in that I've spent so much time in that profession to then become a Bharatanatyam or a Kuchipudi dancer or anything else, any other art form goes for singing or anything. So in that sense, then how does your process of creation of art look like? And the reason I'm asking is how much do you consider the audience's feedback into this dynamic, right? So for you said that your art changes when you go up on stage depending on the energy of the audience. But for someone like you, Ashish, who's making already your art for another person, usually houses that are also function-based, right? And everyone's sense of aesthetic is different. How do you as an artist kind of make art?
So, like I will give you example of Amit Trivedi. Mr. Trivedi, he's a
Musician, yes.
musician.
Yes, of course.
So when I did his projects, and he is a good artist, like, as you know. So we initially talk about, like our dialogue, dialogue between two artists, and then I asked him his ideology about house and his thoughts about architecture and his philosophy towards life, and I noted it down, and then I went home, and then I just studied what he was saying, and then I thought, like, instead of making my house, let's make client's house. And that's my every time I do take this approach, like, let's make what those people think, because they will be living there throughout their life. And then he's a musician, and there could be some other client which will have some different kind of a background, which will have his own definition of his dream house. So my thought is like that, like, let's go as per the persona of that client, and take the approach.
I'm curious though, have you ever made a house that you thought was like absolutely ugly because that's what the client wanted, and then you decided, yaar bahut ganda hai but banana padega?
Now ugly is what is ugly definition?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's different
very
concepts.
Couple of architecture what I see while coming from my house to this place, those are ugly also from my point of view. But that could be very decent kind of a house for that client. So
absolutely,
that we cannot define, this is ugly and this is not ugly. And generally I do, my approach is like I don't overpower, my ideas. But certainly up to one extent, I will take what he wants, because like for you create your artwork and then you show it to others. But for me, I have to understand what they want, and then after that I create my architecture, like it's an art form.
That's definitely interesting. What about you, Paresh? So given that you tangibly work with your hands, what's your thought process behind it?
I feel it is, for me and as potters, it's a little bit different, because what we are making, we can be the first consumers. Whatever we are, every single pot, every single person is going to use. So we can be the first clients for ourselves, and that is how I approach it. And there have been potters around the world. There has been the potter called Richard Batterham. He was a potter who was doing pottery for 60 years of his life, and he was just doing, I think, 4 or 5 forms and 2-3 different colors. And that's it. That's what he did all his life, repeating the same thing every day and again and again. And what the philosophy that he was following all along was, even if no one buys it, I'll use it, no problem. I don't care about selling it off, and people like his clients and his appreciators are people like David Attenborough. Right. So that's where I feel like pottery is a little bit different, where I am doing something for myself first, And then if people like it, people will buy it because there will be people like me. And when when I'm creating something, also when I'm trying to design something, or when I'm trying to explore what do I want to do, I kind of think about it in three different parameters. I think about it in the first thing ki, do I really like seeing this thing? Whatever that inspiration is, you look at everything around you. Do I like seeing this thing? Then you try to make that thing. You try to follow those techniques. You try to reverse engineer. How did this person do this? You try to reverse engineer that thing and try making that thing. How does that making make you feel? Like was it too tedious? Was it too impractical? Too time taking? I don't want to. It's boring. Whatever that is. So if you like that process, then that's a second parameter. Then third parameter, that person might have done it in some technique and his output is looking like that, and you like that output. From your process, what is your output? And do you like that output that you have created? And if I like my product on all three parameters, I like seeing it as a just as an inspiration. I like doing it, and I like what I am actually making.
Right.
If I'm happy with all those three parameters, I feel there will be some audience which will be
Right.
there for it. I don't have to worry about pleasing anyone else after that.
Correct, correct. And that's so interesting again, because I think the three parameters you said are very analytical
Yeah.
and technical, right? So there's a very kind of scientific, mathematical approach also to the way you're doing your art.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just a dichotomy that we consider that art is one thing, science is one thing. I see so much merging of it for all of us. I mean, singing is also in some sense maths, because you're mixing things together. Tal is rhythm is all about maths and calculations, and dance is similar in that sense. And for you, physics is important, and geometry of things is important. And for content creation as well, thinking about the technical aspects of light and brightness and all of that's important, right? So when you are also making art forms, or Shrita, if you're choreographing a dance choreography, is there a process to that you use that's very like logically thinking about things, or is there something that comes to you at the spur of the moment, which is more intuitive?
Yeah, so it again depends. So if there's already a theme set for a choreography, then I'll have to explore in that of how it can be done in different ways. But there's still some kind of boundary that is there. कि इस theme में करना है और this is my limit. However, if most of the time this happens that you hear a certain song and then you're just like, oh my god, this is so beautiful and I could do such abhinaya over here, or this story just goes in line with this piece. And then over that piece there is some sort of like adding up to it, and there are multiple moments that you see how it goes. And I don't think there'll be a lot of structure, but I will also not say there's no structure to it, because I find it more like a semi-structured, because there is intuition, definitely there is sense of creativity to its very raw sense, and also a lot of technical things, like you, because it's dance, you will have to take care of the music, the tal, the laya, and what kind of moments, the rasas and the bhavas, all these come into factor. I mean, you cannot just be like, I will have this piece in this factor and this piece in another factor. It has to be a good combination of all of that to be more presentable. And of course, there's addition at every moment of time. You get inspirations from varied things around your life, and you're like, oh, I can use this moment, or you see something and that's inspiring. You want to incorporate it, and definitely, as Paresh was saying, that it's going to be like a step-by-step process. With I mean, I really like your parameters, the way you defined them. Um I also like to add into it as the process is more enjoyable, and no matter how it's going, it might be chaotic or it can be like smooth sailing. Usually not smooth sailing most of the times. But yeah, the end result is what matters.
Right.
So personally for me, when it is about dance, it is a performing art, so there is a sense of structure in a lot of sense for when you're creating or presenting. However, when it is to do with visual arts or music for that matter, it's more like an expression for myself. So when I'm creating, I don't have any specific thought in my head as to this is something that I'm going to put forth. It's more to do with whatever is coming to me. It's more like a self-expression and just me being me.
Right.
So I think that's interesting to know that there are different creative processes.
Absolutely.
How you're going about art.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of artists can in the very first instance visualize that this is how I want my building
Right,
to look
right.
like, or this is how I want my space to look like, or painting to look like, and then they'll paint the exact way they've visualized it.
Right.
Whereas a lot of artists will have maybe a general theme, like, okay, I want my piece to depict a certain emotion, and it could be abstract and it could just go on canvas, and then they improvise as they go along. And in music also, there's a lot of improvisation that happens at the spur
Yeah.
of the moment, right? And for you, Aryak, I'm curious what you think of, like, what's your process of creating videos? Like, do you always want to make them catered to the audience, or sensational, or kuch taza khabar type, or like, like, what's your thought process? How do you choose that, this is, do you already have a theme in mind, or have you already in your head created, oh, this is a video and this is how exactly I'm going to create it, or does it just happen to you at the spur of the moment?
I have my fixed type of videos.
Okay.
Maybe people out of Maharashtra won't relate to it, or maybe they are not interested to watch it. I never make videos in Hindi. It is full Marathi content, and mostly for Pune. Not even Mumbai. Mostly for Pune, and whatever happens around me, or my process is just observation, and my content is based on my life. If anything happens with me today, tomorrow I'll make a video on it. So, and my thinking is, if this thing is happening with me, I'm sure this is happening with many others.
Right.
So that makes it relatable
Relatable.
to the audience. मतलब a very very small example, you guys must be knowing FC Road ना. So FC Road पे we get very cheap goggles, and there are a lot of stalls. So from one stall I took a goggle for 130 rupees, and he said कि this is the least, you won't get anywhere lesser than this.
Right.
And I just walked a few meters, and just I went there and I got the same goggle for 80 rupees. So that is a content.
Right.
If this thing happened with me, वो एफसी रोड पे घूमने वाले सबके सब हुआ रहेगा. नेक्स्ट डे आई वेंट देयर विथ माय फ्रेंड्स, आई डिड दैट सेम वीडियो वेरी, एंड विद इन वन डे इट वेंट 1 million. तो ऐसे स्मॉल so and then I just put that song, सपना टूटा है तेरे दिल गए तो नहीं कैसे पिजन्स उड़ रहे हैं, मैंने बिल्डिंग से नीचे छलांग मार दी, ऐसे ऐसे मतलब ओवर ड्रामेटिक उसको थोड़ा मैं ऐसे कि फॉर दैट 50 रुपीज. हाँ कि ऐसे मतलब कि, और फिर वो बंदे का आवाज लगाया कि उसने बोला था कि सबसे सस्ता इधर ही मिलेगा वरना जा इधर, और उधर मेरे को मिल गया. तो फिर वो ऐसे नहीं कैसे इसमें टाइम लैप्स की पूरा दुनिया घूम रहा है लेकिन मैं वापस स्टक हूँ, ऐसे वाले टाइम ऐसे. तो वैसे ओवर ड्रामेटिक जो हो रहा है मेरे साथ. And when I started, so I was in a relationship, and my girlfriend used to give me a lot of content, daily fights. तो उसके साथ फाइट हुआ कि मैं किसी लड़के को पकड़ के नेक्स्ट डे उसका वीडियो बनाता था, जो इसने बोला वो सेम लाइंस उधर ऐसे. तो माय कंटेंट मतलब बेसिकली कंटेंट क्रिएशन इज बेस्ड ऑन योर लाइफ, दैट्स इट. वेरी वेरी इजीली आई कैन से दैट ऐसा है.
One of the biggest questions for every subject, मतलब किसी को भी पूछो, people will ask, is this nature or nurture? कुछ innate gift you've come with, or you're learning an art form, let's say, or a skill, or any other field. And I think it's a mix of both. And
Yeah, I think so. It's a mix of both.
Right.
Because you have to be like to become a famous artist. There should be some kind of a talent within you. When you take a birth in this world,
Right.
and then you can polish it. The one can polish it, but if that person doesn't have any essence, one cannot make him like a great artist. Though it is a great guru, there should be some kind of a spark or some kind of fire within that person.
Definitely.
जोक समझने के लिए भी एक ये जोक हाँ ये समझा फिर भी भाई तो सैल्यूट है. मारना छोड़, तो जोक समझा फिर बहुत हो गया. ऐसे ऐसे है मतलब.
Music actually it's very difficult
Yeah.
to make people understand that this is good. Like in your field, 90%, 95% people can like that structure, whatever you are making, or even in content creation, people can easily like or dislike it, correct? But in music, maybe 4% people can like, they are like शास्त्रीय संगीत ही अच्छा है. 10% people can say ghazal अच्छा है. Also, to make everyone happy is not easy in any field. In music especially, I feel there are too many genres. So if you're stick to one genre, then it is quite difficult to
Right.
make everyone happy. So, like he said, कि सबके बस की काम नहीं है. तो in classical music, nowadays, because of social media, people have started liking classical music also, and maybe because of too much technology used in music field, people have started thinking that classical music ही अभी असली चीज बची है.
Authentic.
हाँ,
I
authentic.
think I can agree to this in, like, even Koinur can agree to this in classical dance also, for that matter. And I think it's the similar game. So Western is, much easier to do or something like that. And even for the audience, for that matter, if there's a program, uh, people might have different views about classical dance, whether it's a slow piece.
Correct.
For example, in music also, when there's alankar or like just the starting part that we just get into the rag and everything. So that's quite slow and people find it boring at times, especially regarding the content that is coming up on social media these days, like just not more than 10 seconds, or you need to have attention like only for that time.
Right.
And when you talk about traditional pieces, like classical pieces, I mean, initially in Kuchipudi also, there were dance pieces that were done for like 3 days straight. Like it was such a big thing. And now the performances and the programs that we get, people are like 5 minutes max or like 2 minutes. And you're like, how are you supposed to concise all of that in such a short duration? But that is definitely a challenge to keep the audience engaging and not breaking the traditions also at the same time.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I also feel like keeping up with the current audience is important, because otherwise the art form becomes obsolete. Right? People will stop watching things if they find it too boring. And as the audience evolves, the art form also needs to evolve. And I know a lot of traditionalists will probably say, oh, we can't do that. Like, there's no way that Kuchipudi can be done on Marathi songs, for example. And that's what we actually performed yesterday. It was all based on Marathi poetry. And it was to make Kuchipudi accessible to the masses, right? Like, if in Pune, I perform a Kuchipudi dance drama, which is completely in Telugu, most people will not understand the language. And if you don't understand the language, you don't know the mudras and the hand gestures that we use in Kuchipudi, you will not understand what we are depicting. So when you can't make meaning out of it, then how will you like it, right? So to make it accessible, you have to sometimes break tradition. You have to explore different media, different topics, and especially because Kuchipudi also started out as a means of social change. There was social transformation. There were these group of dancers who would go from one village to another and try to tell a story and pass on some social message through it. And so if we have to do that now, we definitely want to do it in a way that's also attracting the audience, right?
The new generation.
Sorry?
Or the new generation.
Or the new generation, exactly. And I think the audience then, especially when you're commercializing the art form, becomes very important, right? Like you cater, especially as a content creator, I'm sure you cater to the needs of the audience as opposed to more what you want to do personally. And that actually is a really good way of also asking all of you about whether there is access to art in general for everyone, or can everyone access it easily. If you've not satisfied your fundamental needs, your basic needs of food, clothing, shelter is what we consider basic needs, right? If you've not satisfied those, do you think art can still feature in somewhere in a life that's struggling to achieve basic needs?
I feel it can still be there, but some art forms are difficult to access than others. So for like filmmaking or content creation, which are much more accessible because of the technology, because of everything else, because everything is online, it is much more accessible for anyone to understand and for anyone to learn. But some of the art forms which are much more traditional, which are a little bit more niche, those art forms are difficult to get in. And to say that, and those, especially those ones, take a very long time to even say that you are a little bit proficient into it, to put it out there.
Right.
So in that sense, it is a bit elitist, wherein you have to have all those other things sorted, and then you can put in enough time into the art form to kind of get into the skills of it.
Right. So I find it interesting that you think the video creation is kind of easier, for example.
Not easier,
Right.
it is much more accessible to learn.
Right.
to learn, not even the practice everyone can do. But for example, if I want to do pottery as a practice right now, just as a hobby, the investment for that I have to do is probably between 5 and 10 lakh rupees, which is not accessible to people.
Right.
Then I have to think about it as a profession. I
Right.
can't think about it as a hobby because it will be a very expensive hobby. I
Right.
can't just pursue it. But if I want to do video creation just for my own self, not even I'm saying for content creation or putting it out there, I just want to explore it as an art form for my own self. It is accessible. I can do it on my phone right now. It is accessible at least to learn. To sustain and to grow, it's very difficult because there is so much amount of competition.
Right.
But like that kind of changes where it's a niche, it's very easy to, once you have the access to it, it's very easy to grow. And when it's much more accessible, it's very easy to very difficult to grow
Right.
into that profession.
No, I see your point, and the only reason I asked is, and maybe Arya, you can pitch in on this, because I think even creating quality content requires money and requires time and effort. And again, if you are busy thinking about your basic needs, do you think that's something everyone can just pick up and do, or at least people who are in tune or attuned to that kind of art form, do you think they can just pick this up and go ahead?
Not from starting. Initially तो नहीं होता, of course. Initially we don't have that brain also कि what do we need actually. But it is that slow track actually, if you follow, if you are consistent. So within 2 to 3 years, you start earning enough amount of money, and you can fund yourself properly. You can buy all those new mobiles, new technology, any prop you need, new clothes. Because in our field, our audience keeps a watch कि इसने ये shirt repeat किया, ये pant repeat किया. Now I play a very rich character in my reels. So in that, if I hold iPhone 15, people just laugh at me. I need to show 15 Pro. So that is very minute details I need to show.
Right.
But fortunately, from my content creation, I'm able to do that. So not only me, but everybody who is who does great धीरे धीरे उसमें तो वो हो ही जाता है. And if मतलब accessible as in learning भी easy है, करना मुश्किल है. कि ठीक है भाई, learn तो मैं कर लूँगा, लेकिन if you don't have that spark, nobody can teach you art. Nobody can.
Right. And it's also the time you take, right? Like that time also you need to invest in that.
2 to 3 years consistently. उसमें दूसरा कुछ नहीं करने का. मतलब अभी for me, I have no family time, no girlfriend, nothing. Just अबे मेरा दोस्त भी ऐसे कि if they are with their girlfriends now, they will make a video only there full time video only. So my friend just went on his honeymoon this year. So there also he shot 6 reels. So 6 days का ट्रिप था, उसे 6 reels बनाने वाले daily upload from Maldives. So we were like, भाई तू कर रहा क्या है उधर? So मतलब content creation for our partners or for our families, it is a headache.
Right.
किधर आता नहीं है, मैरिज को नहीं आता, किधर नहीं आता, उधर आए फिर वीडियो ही करेगा, ऐसे तुम मत आ, ऐसे इसमें वो ये है, तो that's it.
Right. No, that's an interesting fact. I mean, it is a fact at the end of the day, right? Like for a lot of content creators. Right. And I travel also with photographers sometimes, and they'll stop at every minute. It makes it for very difficult traveling because I'm like, okay, can we just move on? Like keep going, but it is their profession also. So
I was
totally
a photographer.
Right. So you know.
During my engineering time.
Right.
For as a part-time job, I used to shoot in clubs, नहीं क्या वो रात को clubs में shoot करते. But photographers don't get respect. Honestly, मैं sorry मैं लेकिन मैंने जो observe किया है, बहुत ऐसे निकाल फोटो, इधर आना, इधर फोटो निकाल. अगर कोई अच्छा फोटो नहीं आया तो those people will scold you. तो पेमेंट तो बहुत कम रहता है और रिस्पेक्ट तो जीरो रहती है. तो फिर यू शुड बी अ वेरी ग्रेट फोटोग्राफर की, नहीं क्या मतलब सेलिब्रिटी फोटोग्राफर, देन यू विल गेट रिस्पेक्ट. तो धीरे धीरे आई केम इन फ्रंट ऑफ कैमरा ऐसे. तो एंड जैसे आपने एक पॉइंट बोला था कि प्रेशर रहता है आर्ट में, प्रेशर बन जाता है. तो अभी दिवाली में आई गॉट एन एड, एंड उनका ये प्रेशर था कि लिंक टू दिवाली. So people are this Diwali, let's not eat that traditional farad, let's go for. मैं बोला ये कौन सा है, कौन करेगा? नहीं करो. We want to do this. Why always farad? You can also go for. So and they were paying me enough, मतलब अच्छा खासा था amount, लेकिन my audience would have unfollowed me.
True.
कि तुम ये क्या दिखा रहे हो, मतलब तुम ट्रेडिशनल कपड़े पहन रहे हो और पराए लेट्स गो एंड ईट बर्गर, ऐसे नहीं होता, मतलब इतना इतना नहीं प्रेशर डालना चाहिए. तो वो डील मैंने कैंसिल कर दिया. मतलब कुछ भी लोग बोलते पागल जैसे, तो वो मतलब
That's the like sometimes you have to other to what the client wants.
Yeah.
That happens probably you might know in like designing or graphic.
Yeah, exactly. Even in architecture,
Right.
it happens like that. Like nowadays, especially, a client come up with the instant, all those internet or Google images, and they will say like they just wanted to do something like this, but whether that is feasible in this appropriate plot, that your size is good enough to have this, or your spending capacity is there, or like all such kind of things, one should understand. I mean. And the client doesn't have that idea, they like it and they will like, wow, let's do this.
Right.
But it's not feasible. I mean, you have to understand, because architecture is not like an art kind of a thing. It's it's a technical. It's more on technology and more like a physical form. It's not visual form or performing art form.
Right.
So
I think in music also, no, it's same. If I am singing for the audience only, then it's quite different,
right.
because I will observe their reaction while I'm singing, and with their reaction, my music will change, because
I see.
in
Yeah.
classical music, nothing is fixed.
Fixed, yeah.
In any, maybe it is different than any
while
other art.
performing,
That,
you will get
when I'm going on the stage,
Right.
Maybe only rag I have fixed, but what I'm going to perform, what is the only composition, maybe bandish. So it is fixed, but otherwise all improvisations any artist do on stage only.
Right.
So it changes.
But actually, that's the best thing, right? I mean, like in each performer, you will have some kind of a different.
Exactly. So that's why I told you,
variation.
in the starting,
Yeah.
it's not very different for me, that
Right.
hobby and profession.
Right.
Commercialization is different. If I want more audience, then I will sing a ghazal, or like on social media. I don't only sing classical music. I sing too many different genres also.
Correct.
But on stage, when I have 250 or 1000 or 2000 audience, I will sing classical music only. And it's difficult, because just like you said, if there is the thing going on in the mind that I have to earn, then people obviously it is very difficult to stick to one thing. Right? That in your field, pot like this, he can see good things in that thing, but maybe कोई बोल सकता है कि ठीक है इतना कुछ नहीं है. So it's difficult that if he wants to earn money, then it's different.
I think everyone will agree, any art form, anything that you are trying to do, it needs time.
Yeah.
And time is the luxury that we are all getting to some extent, where you have to kind of hone in into the art. That needs time, and that's where you have to keep, if your stomach is full, then only you can put in that much amount of time. If those things are taken care of to at least some extent, that's where I feel like that. And when you start going into that profession, which is good or not good, or all those things start coming in, if you have put in enough time to explore whatever art form you're doing, if you're doing content creation or architecture or dance or anything, what do you want to do? What do you like in that? If you have actually explored those parts and then turned into a profession, then you are not really caring about what people think about it. People will be there, and there is a niche audience for every single person. And it's not necessary that every artist has to be famous.
Correct.
I can just survive. I can just earn enough amount of money for me to eat and just survive. And probably I'll turn to something else to earn a little bit more money. That will probably balance out the purity of art, was what we kind of call it. But so that's where I feel it should be more sustainable towards how do you approach it, and how do you not get into the things that you don't want to do.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's again very subjective how much of the social boundaries you want to cross and how much you don't want to cross. Even for Janki and the feminist interpretation of the Sita's perspective of the Ramayana, the first time we actually showcased it, we publicized it in newspapers as well, right? And there was this group of extremists who came and said, how dare you do this, right? Because we were showing Sita questioning Ram and her decision, and his decision to leave her in the forest after Love and Kush, like when she was pregnant, and how Ravan actually might have been a good demon king, not a bad demon, right? So there were a lot of controversial perspectives that we had added, and we did get threatened by a group of people, and we did get, we were scared that they would come and vandalize the auditorium where we were performing. So even as dancers, I think we've had that social moral policing by people. And I think also as potters, it could be not in terms of like what you're making functionally, but it could be maybe sometimes as to what you're making,
It's
whether
there,
it's
it's
true
there.
to the art,
That's
right?
true,
So
yeah, right.
there's different kinds of policing. So I think it's so subjective also, and I think it's our responsibility to be true to the form that we think is art for us. And what do you think is not art for you? Like, I think that's an interesting question, because it's the law of like, in Indian philosophy, you call it neti neti, right? No iti, which is not this, not this. So when you're describing something abstract like a formless being or like Brahman for that matter, you always describe it not as what it is, but as what it isn't. So what according to you is not art for sure? Like what are the, yeah, go ahead.
In our case, there are many video creators who have first tried comedy, and when they failed in comedy, they have started making emotional and sympathy gaining videos. फ्री हग्स वो ऐसे रहते हैं, बहुत सारे कंटेंट रहता है कि 10 रुपीज एंड फ्री हग्स एंड आई विल टेल यू, आई विल लिसन टू योर स्टोरी एंड ऐसे, मतलब ये तो वो मतलब उनको है ना, नो बडी रियली अप्रिशिएट्स दैट टाइप ऑफ ये कंटेंट कि वन डे आई विल स्पेंड लाइक इफ आई एम ब्लाइंड, तो फिर ब्लाइंड लोगों का लाइफ कैसे रहेगा, तो वो सिंपथी है, लिटरल सिंपथी है उसमें, यू विल जस्ट गेट सैड कमेंट्स एंड ये तो अगर कोई मतलब हमारी इसमें जो बाउंड्रीज है कि सैड इतना रहेगा ना कंटेंट, तो लोग ज्यादा टाइम तक फॉलो नहीं करते, मतलब उसमें एंटरटेनिंग बहुत कम एस्पेक्ट रहता है, आप उनको नचाओ, उनको फुल डीजे बनो, उनको नचाओ, म्यूजिक कॉमेडी करो, तो वो लाइफ लॉन्ग तुम्हारे साथ रहेंगे वो एज एन आर्टिस्ट.
I think something that you enjoy first, and like something that you want, the not a sense of desire, but a sense of being. Are you saying that everything is art? So like subjectively it might differ from person to person. जैसे उन्होंने बोला कि उनके लिए ये आर्ट नहीं, पर उस बंदे के लिए होगा ये आर्ट. So उसे खुशी मिलती होगी ये करने में, या उसे करना पसंद होगा शायद से. So for me, art is something that you like doing, that you enjoy doing, and not necessarily the positive emotions. It can also be a negative sense.
But if you say art is something that you like and enjoy doing, I like and enjoy walking, then does my walking, is it an art?
It's how you look at it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So walking can be an art for me.
Okay.
The way you walk.
Yeah, the way I walk, or just naturally walking, being present in that moment and just observing, that can also be a way
Right.
of art for me.
Okay.
To understand what is not art, first of all, we have to understand what is art.
I thought we could go in, in the opposite direction to understand what is art. Maybe we should try and understand first what is not art. But yeah, please go ahead with your.
So, as you know, both of them mentioned very, very rightly, art is everywhere, and even like when a leaf, like I was just saying, like that leaf is falling down, and the way it is going in this direction, that's also like a movement of art, right? And someone can get inspired with that, and you can express in your dance form, or you can express in your singing, or something you can express in that moment in his pottery. So art is everywhere. That's what I believe, and the way you take it, and the way you process on it, and then you put it in your form.
So it comes to me from this conversation that art is actually a verb, not a noun. Like it's a process.
Yeah, it's a process.
It's
I
doing.
personally feel it's process.
Doing.
It's doing,
Right.
So it can be like the way you ask her, like walk is an art. It could be art because it's a verb, it's action.
Would you need someone to appreciate it for it to be called art?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
And like, what happens?
Appreciation is afterwards. Yeah. Appreciation is afterwards.
For sure, it needs an audience.
So when art stops, then appreciation starts.
Right.
Like for that, you have to first of all, from the conception, you have to put your ideas on paper or whatever, like the stage or whatever. Then it becomes art, and art ends, and then appreciation starts.
I feel there is a lot of gatekeeping in art, and who is doing the gatekeeping also has to be seen. Like, why is it not? If something is not there, why is it not considered art? Why is it not considered the right thing to do? There is a lot of gatekeeping, which is a
100%.
societal thing, not a really art, the real thing.
Right.
So that's where we have to kind of, I at least see, okay, this is just gatekeeping by a group of people who have been successful before, and they have kind of created these boundaries and lines, and that's why you don't do
Right,
that.
right.
That I think should not be there. Anything can be there. Anything should be possible, and everything
Right.
should be considered. And probably not enjoyed by everyone. That's fine.
That's fine,
That's
yeah.
not necessary.
Yeah, I think it is definitely subjective.
Yeah.
And I also think it relates also to, going back to our discussion on morality and who puts these moral
Yeah.
boundaries or social boundaries, right? Like, it's the same with gatekeeping in art. Who decides that these are forms that can be known as art and these are that cannot be known as art? And I think in India, I think we don't have, like, art is also a very Western conceptualization, the word itself, right? In India, we have the word kala,
Kala, yeah.
which is actually skill. So it's a skill in everything that you can then develop and then you can then
Exactly.
go ahead with.
And as we see, being India has a great history.
Right.
Like, just an example. Initially, we used to write, with those pen, with with ink and
Right.
Vedas and all
Quills,
those
yeah.
things, and that it was custom at that time, and now it has known as an art.
Correct.
So it happens, like the way you move forward.
Absolutely.
Like, there are a couple of things which is like very old techniques, and nowadays it is considered art. On the other way, like typewriter, initially it was just like typing, and now with the typewriter you are creating portrait. So it is a new technology, but it is becoming art. So it could be old, it could be new. The way you look at it and the way you put it, perceive it and express it.
Right. And
That's
I
an
think
art.
it's a constantly dynamic.
Yeah, it's constantly
thing, right?
dynamic. It goes from here to here
Correct.
and to
It's
here
a
to
circle
here.
of life. Like, you keep going back to
Exactly.
the forms and you keep coming back
Yeah.
to it. Like, Meher, you also mentioned at the beginning that, Indian classical, people are now looking at it as something that's pure compared to things that use too many technical or technological advancements and computerized things in music. And I think it's just a circle. It's going to have these ebbs and flows. And I think everything, I was really trying to get to what is art and how people define it, but I'm getting a sense from almost all of you, except Aryak maybe, who's like, audience needs to be there, that it's super subjective, right? Like, and I think Aryak, you will also agree that it's super, super subjective, right? Everyone has their own definitions of art and
Yeah.
own ways of looking at it, and I think
You might not be able to commercialize it,
Right.
Yeah.
but it's still art. It's still there. It still exists. So
And the
yeah.
moralities or like the boundaries that are there, I think to some extent they are put by us ourselves. It is not really, you have the freedom of doing whatever you want. You are putting those boundaries yourself for something which is considered society and all of these things. But in the end, you have the liberty of exploring to whatever extent you want.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's. I have
Subjective.
now. It's subjective. It's very individualistic, right? And I have 500 questions in my head about a lot of things, but I know that we are on a deadline and we need to all leave. So I would like to end this by saying thank you so much, all of you. We've had a very interesting discussion. This was a lot of fun for me. I hope it was fun for all of you.
Sure. Yeah,
as well.
definitely.
It was a really interesting discussion, and I really am grateful for your time today. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you for
calling us.
calling us.